Sounds like we have architects, we have interior designers, we have other people who are space specialists, GIS specialists, but we are responsible for all kind of aspects of improvements to the campus, as well as ensuring that database is kept up so that we understand space of the campus, both in buildings and in the exterior. That's how we're organized. We manage projects, we do planning, we make sure that they're built well and adhere to our design guidelines. So that's probably a good place to stop and let some of my colleagues talk about it.
Okay. Well, much like Evan, I kind of reached a juncture in my career after being in private practice for about 10 years where the firm I was with offered me partnership. And before I got married, I said, I don't think I want to go down that road. So I too looked at other options and happened to know a couple of key people who worked at NC State, one of whom was a project manager at the time but became University Architect. That was Mike Harwood. And funny enough, we were both working on the same project from different ends. I was on the architecture side working for a church project he happened to be a member of, and he was on the owner's rep side of things. So we just got to talking, and he told me all about NC State, and I knew someone else that was a friend of my husband's who, left that firm and started to work for NC State. And it sounded intriguing, and I was kind of ready for a change. So I kind of went through my little, crisis of what do I do next kind of thing, and landed there. And I've been with NC State now for 20 years, but have taken on 3 different roles during my time there. So it's kind of been this progression. When I first came, they were looking for someone to lead a small team that did smaller renovation projects focused on labs and classrooms and office kind of space renovation. And then we also were responsible for some safety funds, ADA funds, classroom funds, so we focused on those. And I had done that for about maybe 7 years, and then took some time off to raise my family. And about 3.5 years later, I get a call from Mike Harwood, who said, "Are you ready to come back?" And I was like, I don't know, make me an offer, And so they did, and it was great. I mean, I took some time off. Was I really ready to come back? Maybe not, but I think an opportunity that good lands in your lap, you want to take it. So in this role, my second role, I started working on the larger projects like the Terry Center companion animal vet med building that they were building, or the Tally Student Union, for example, those kinds of larger projects. And that was really very fulfilling. One thing that I really enjoy about this process, projects, impact campus, and over time, they really start to transform campus. So that got me really excited. And then, this other position came open. It's funny because when Mike Harwood moved on, Lisa Johnson, who I mentioned, took his position as university architect, and that left her position open. And as luck would have it, we had worked very, very closely together on the Tally Student Union. So she knew me, I knew her. We worked really well together, and luck would have it, I got that position. So I felt very fortunate to get that. So progression from small, really kind of renovation type projects to really big projects to now overall campus planning. So it's been a very interesting progression for me. As Evan mentioned, it is a big transition coming from private practice to that, because all these institutions have their own, whether you're land grant or public or private, you have these rules, regulations, policies, all these things you have to comply with over and above code and zoning and all those other things. So it's just this other layer of kind of red tape, which gets a little bit getting used to. And the other thing is there are so many stakeholders on a campus, right? You have to work with people. So our ADC of facilities, and I'll get to how we're structured or not structured in a minute, but he came from the Navy, which was an interesting sort of transition admiral. He was an admiral in the Navy. And he emphasized how important it is to do CQ. This is what we call CQ. You communicate, collaborate, and you coordinate. And that has been kind of our motto and how we operate on team. But in terms of structure, so it's funny you asked that because we're in the middle of a big facilities organization reset. He doesn't want to call it a reorg, but it's more of a reset. And what he's trying to do is streamline it more towards what the functions are. So the functions are going to now align a little better under plan, build, maintain, and then core service, those four things. So we're kind of going through a whole lot of CQing right now to figure out what the heck we're doing with our organization. But I think at the end of the day, the whole goal is to really deliver better customer service and work better amongst ourselves. So, you know, change is hard. We all know that, whether it's individual change or a whole organization change. We have upwards of 900 people in facilities. So it's a big effort, big effort. Our particular office of the University Architect has about 17 positions. Chris used to work with me, and he's over here now. Chris Johnson in the back. Say hi. So we're still trying to fill one position that's vacant and one position that we just created. So shameless plug, if you're interested in working at NC State, come talk to me, okay?
Working over for UNC.
Shameless plug number 2. I'm sure you're all looking for good staff as well.
But the Office of the University Architect, we do the same thing. We do, you know, campus planning and design, capital project planning, master planning, smaller scale planning, studies. We also have a survey unit under our organization and GIS and all the FIS information data as well. So kind of a mixed bag. Our sister units right now on the floor are the capital project management, that's formal design, formal construction. And then there's a side sort of bar to that with informal design construction. So we're trying to see how that might work out. And then we have, you know, budget and other services like that as well on our floor. But those are the work with most. So stay tuned. Things are changing. We'll maybe report back at a future time, let you know how it all landed.
All right. How about you, Adem?
Can everyone hear me in the back? My voice tends to not carry.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
So my journey to get to where I am. So pretty early on in my architectural education, I realized I didn't do traditional architecture. All it took was like my first summer internship, spending my time redlining and doing, you know, door and finish schedules. I was like, yeah, there's got to be another route here that I can find my calling. So shortly after graduating my degree in architecture, I was able to find a career path sort of focusing on planning and programming and master planning, but still at an architecture firm. And I really enjoyed the interactions with the clients, you know, being there, kind of, you know, getting to know the clients, making those early critical decisions that kind of set the tone and the path of the projects to come. And really kind of found my calling and my place there. So I was doing that in the private sector for about 10 years in Atlanta. And a lot of the work we were doing was in higher ed. And I always found myself kind of drawn to the higher education environment, just in terms of, you know, the different personalities, the different types of projects, the fact that you have really almost every building type represented on a college and university setting, almost like little microcosm cities that are kind of self-sustaining in their own unique ways. So I kind of found myself focusing more on that within the firm. And I got to a point where I was given an ownership opportunity, and at the same time was contacted by a recruiter about this opportunity at Duke. And so I kind of had a decision to make, and this was back in 2006, 2007. And we decided to kind of pick up, leave Atlanta, and come to Duke. But my position at the time was assistant director of planning and design, and it was a new role. And one of the things that attracted me to the role was that nobody had it before me, and so I could kind of mold it around my strengths, if you will. And there were no preconceived notions about what this person should or shouldn't be doing because it was a new role. So I started that role in 2007, and At the time, we had a university architect's office. There was a gentleman named too by the name of John Pierce, and he was sort of at the tail end of his career. And he ended up retiring somewhere around 2013-ish, if I had to guess. And for a multitude of reasons, Duke decided not to hire another university architect. Part of the reason for that was because our executive vice president at the time, a gentleman by the name of Tolman Trask, was in a lot of ways the de facto university architect. He probably had the most interest in planning, design, and construction of any EVP in the country. So he took a leading role in that capacity. And during those years, between probably 2000, coming out of the Great Recession up until about 2019, we had some of the busiest years of kind of growth and expansion at Duke that we've ever seen. So that was an interesting time. And so then fast forward, Tolman Trask retired. There became this opportunity to rethink kind of how we're doing our business. There became a shift from growth and expansion coming out of the pandemic to reinvesting in what we have, where we're focused on renewal, on utilization, on being better stewards of what we have. And so there was an opportunity then, at the time when I was hired, my group, planning and design, was actually inside the Office of Project Management. So one of the organizational changes coming out of the pandemic was to pull out planning and design to be its own department in facilities, because one could make a solid argument that the person that's in charge of schedule and budget should also not be in charge of planning and design decisions, right? So pull that out, create some independence, right? And so after an interview process, I ended up getting the role of director of planning and design, and the decision was still made to not hire another full-time CRM. So the way that we're structured organizationally is within facilities, we have my group, which is planning and design, and just similar to what you've heard already, we do planning, we do master planning, space planning, we do early project scoping. We have a GIS group. We have a advising university architect that's in a part-time capacity. We have our full-time university landscape architect. And we're there sort of on the front lines of projects, helping scope things out, determining that early direction of a project, working with senior leaders and the board of trustees, and kind of going through those early processes. And we have a separate project management, and the way that we're set up at Duke is that the project managers are actually involved from concept and commissioning. So me and planning and design provide really kind of design oversight about the direction of a project, but the project managers are also there. So there's no handoff, because that can get tricky depending on kind of how you're set up. By having the PMs involved from beginning to the end, they have that sense of ownership that you can otherwise sometimes maybe lack if there's a handoff process. So in addition to project management and planning and design, we also have a utilities and engineering group. We have a facilities operations group. We have a landscape and grounds group, and housekeeping group, as well as our sort of business office. So I'm in this new role. I've been at Duke 15 years, but I'm only in the role as director for less than a year. So still trying to navigate the waters. We have, I mentioned Tolman Trask retired. We have a new executive place who is very different from Tolman Trask. Things are very much now based on process and transparency and collaboration. So there's an interesting time to do things the way I would go so far as to say an improved way. And again, the shift has changed. The focus has shifted from growth and expansion to investing and being better stewards.
Great. I like the point that you made about how the department changed during the pandemic. I wanted to know if you all have like a specific change besides all the meetings going to Zoom that you experienced.
Struggling with I mean, the pandemic will become endemic, but it hasn't ended, right? We're still kind of struggling with certain things. And I'm just going to say from from a standpoint, like we did work remotely for a good portion of that time, but we kept working throughout the whole time, talking to others on the tour that we stayed busy, extremely busy the whole time. I think the question now is like, what do we do with all the space on campus with all these people who want to hold on to that hybrid kind of arrangement? You want the hybrid arrangement to attract people to stay. Flexibility clearly works. Productivity was great. We didn't suffer from a productivity standpoint. In fact, I think I got more productive with fewer interruptions. But then what do you do with all that office space? So we're really kind of struggling with faculty who will come to campus just long enough to make sure they keep their offices, staff who do the same, they kind of figure out that's kind of the way things should roll. But when I walk through buildings, a lot of them are vacant, you know, and so it's like, are we really being good stewards of our space? We need to figure this out a little bit better. We're looking for those opportunities and how it all works.
We're very much also trying to figure that out. It's possible that most organizations across the country are asking those kinds of questions. Well, you know, and I talk to certain people in the design community that do a lot of work in workspace design. You know, so oh my gosh, like everybody wants to have the same conversation. What do we do? Should we you know, go to hotel and hot desking, you know, little offices, no offices? What should we do? So that's a change and a conundrum, even within my own department, as Chris will attest. We're having some heart-to-heart conversations about, you know, okay, now it's been 2.5 years. What do we want to do? Because for a long time, almost the entire 2.5 years feels like most people in my department, so it's funny, I'm about 30 people, have come into the office 2 days a week. Not a very good utilization of space. We know around campus, you can walk into almost any of the buildings around here and see lots of empty workspaces on most days, but nobody wants to give up that space. And we have growth in certain areas. So we have a new school of data science society that's trying to get off the ground. Just started this year, hopes to grow to 40 faculty within 5 years. And they say, where can we live? You know, do we need to build new buildings? Some people feel like, why do we need to build new buildings when we have all this empty space? So it's a conundrum. You know, I also heard stories about, you know, change in the organization of facilities, and that's something also worth noting. I think a lot of retirements have happened over the last 2 years, not just university facilities department, obviously, but it's caused rethinking of how to organize ourselves. Also, okay, we still need to do all this work where we find good people, but a lot of people have retired, and it's caused a rethinking of the way we do business.
Yeah, similar to, I mean, Duke is a very decentralized place, and so senior leadership at Duke has actually allowed each individual department to come up with their own policies with regards to flex work, hybrid work, whatever you call it. So what that's resulted in is sort of this mixed bag where you have about 20%, and I'm just focusing on sort of staff, not on faculty. About 20% of staff at Duke is back 5 days a week full-time in the office. 20% of staff is like fully, like never back in the office. And then 60%, the vast majority of the rest of us are in some sort of hybrid type of work arrangement that is sort of dictated in the department. So that's created this environment where I would say overall utilization is low, but it's been difficult to kind of recapture space because it's this kind of patchwork of pockets of availability all over campus. So I think that we're still trying to get our arms around how best to deal with this forward. So you know, many of you working with many of your clients have seen some innovative approaches towards that of all years. But yeah, we're still trying to sort of figure out and navigate what this new normal really looks like and how best to kind of better utilize what we have.
I will add, we are looking at pilot project, what we found on campus. Certain staff do work really well remotely, and they tend to be the OIT folks, the budget folks, the finance folks. So more the service. I don't think faculty, they'll still have the flexibility, but they need to meet with students and be on campus. If the decision for us was made back in July to come back full time, like we all needed to come back pretty much full time, but with a little bit of flexibility. So like I'll work 1 day a week from home if my calendar allows me to, but often I'll have the need to go onto campus for meetings or something. We collaborate better in person. That's one thing we also discovered. I think just even on projects with design teams, it's just more effective if you're all there talking in person. We all know the awkwardness of Zoom meetings where people are trying to say something, they're stepping on each other's toes, and you're not looking at each other, you're looking at something else on the camera. It's awkward. It's not the same as being in person. So I think from a collaboration and communication standpoint, we just work better in person. But I will say there is some beauty to Zoom meetings too, because you can get from point A to point B on Zoom much faster. The hard part has been hybrid. Those are more awkward. It's just technology, rooms have different technologies depending on where you go on campus. There's different systems, different platforms, and then you've got to navigate each one of those rooms kind of separately. You go across campus trying to help, and as soon as they leave the room and something goes wrong, and it's awkward. But I think we're all trying to figure this out, and if we have some good lessons learned from our pilot project, we'd be glad to come back and share that too.
I wanted to also just have two quick things about pandemic lessons in design. So the two biggest things in my mind that we saw and learned that we don't do well are the way we design outdoor spaces, how people use outdoor spaces, and indoor air quality. Those were the two things I'd say we jumped on first. First, the indoor air quality. We thought, oh my gosh, how many people asked, like, how many air changes are happening in the space? People who didn't know what that meant 2 months ago are asking, like, how many air changes? What filter? Is it a MERV 15? What are you asking? And it was right then also like, a canopy here, a canopy there. And now that we're kind of on, not the pandemic's over, despite what Biden says, it's apparent that we're still not sure what to do about those things, because those are areas that nobody wants to fund. And you realize much more, I think, we're on the side of the table, how important we're find money to do certain things that are going to improve the life of the community that you're serving. And nobody wants to invest in great indoor air quality or in landscape. Very hard to find state money or donor.
So my question for you, did any of those design decisions that were learned from the pandemic go into the design of this?
I think the indoor air quality in this space is better than 90+% of the buildings on campus. I mean, obviously we have lab buildings where you have to run through air and all that sort of thing, but for a classroom building, I think this is on the leading edge of that, because we were designing it during that time, building during that time. And, in terms of outdoor space, you can kind of tell we're in this kind of constrained area. But there wasn't, even the little landscape moments around the building, it was hard to like convince people to move some budget towards landscape.
One thing that we did, which is very similar to other universities, we popped up tents everywhere, right, for people to spread out and take advantage of the outdoors. We happen to be living in a state that has good outdoor weather for a good portion of the year. It can get hot, obviously, in the summer, but the students are not on campus during those times. So we were able to kind of do some analysis and figure out of the dozens and dozens of tents that we put up around campus, which ones have the most foot traffic, which ones are most popular. And so we're looking now at actually some demonstration projects of making permanent exterior shade structures, covered structures in particular locations as informed by that analysis. and then developing this, what we're calling a kit of parts of materials that make sense within the Duke context. And we can have, this can be sort of scaled up, if you will, over time. And we're sort of funding question, we're pushing that out towards the users. So if it's something that's within the sort of residential quad area, student affairs has to go look in one location that's kind of adjacent to the law school. They would pay for that. So we've got another way of looking at it, by who would sort of be adjacent owners of the space and having them kind of serve as so we're just sort of coming out of the feasibility study on that and develop the kit of parts. Now we're going to go ahead and initiate actual projects themselves. So interesting lessons learned in terms of, again, learning from each other in terms of the best approaches.
We've talked a good bit about some of the challenges that you all have been through, but what are some of the rewarding things about your role?
I would say, seeing people use the space that we create. When we opened this building in the spring and seeing students in here this semester, I find very rewarding. So the role in the lives of people. That's kind of what I got excited about when I was in practice, but I feel like that's why I do it here too. And it's rewarding in a different way because, this may sound obvious, but in a way it's worth stating, I think, at least for me, it's knowing that a lot of people have tried to do what I'm doing here before, and that there'll be a lot of people that after I'm gone, that I'm just trying to play a role, moving the ball forward, making this place, which I think is a wonderful place, strongly emotionally about their experience in Chapel Hill, that make it a little bit better and then pass it off to the next person. Kind of having that long perspective of being a steward in a very long operation, I find very rewarding.
For me, I would say the most rewarding parts are twofold. One, the relationships that you build across campus, really becomes this community of stakeholders that are all trying to do what's best for the university. So, whether it be people in athletics or the library system or the provost office, you name it, building those relationships over time has really been rewarding for me. And then secondly, it is, having been at Duke now for 15 years, including during some of the most busy years we've ever had in terms of growth and expansion, seeing those projects that I played a hand in and being there, getting to interact in the buildings, walk past the buildings, see the open spaces and the connectivities and the improvements we made on campus on a daily basis. It's not like it's something that I don't see regularly. I see every day. I get to see the projects that I played a part in. Some more successful than others, right? But you learn those lessons as well. So to me, those are the two most rewarding parts: just the relationships, and then seeing the end product and getting to live in that environment for years to come.
I would agree with both. It also goes back to, when you're in a university community like at NC State, you do feel like you're all part of the Wolfpack community and that you're all working towards that mission of the university, and we're there to support that mission. I particularly enjoy working with all the people on campus, the interesting designers I get to come across, and the working relationships are really kind of important to me. But back to the stakeholders, we work with so many interesting faculty and smart people just doing really incredible research and teaching projects and students. And occasionally I'll be on a project where I do come across getting to work with students, and they just energize me because they give me hope for the future. They're just so bright and passionate and energetic about what they're doing. And that's just really a cool thing for me. But ultimately I do it because I want to see something transform. I really enjoy making that positive impact step by step on campus. And the nice thing, back to what you were saying, Adem, is, it's like a mini city. You have all these completely different types of projects. No project is the same. You will never encounter the same project or the same building committee or the same dynamic or any of that. So it's almost like getting to work on all these different projects without having to leave that community. You're there, you're not traveling, but you're always working on something different. And in our roles, we get to poke our fingers into a lot of different things, but there's never a boring day. I'm never doing the same thing twice. So it's a really good learning experience too for, I think, being in this profession. You just get to cover a lot of different ground, and it's fascinating.
So I do have one more question for them, and then I'll open the floor up to questions. So it's a little time for you to think about what you want to ask. So can you tell us about either your most interesting project that you've been able to work on, or the one that required the most coordination?
Like choosing among your children, right? Unlike in practice, where maybe you just work on one project at a time or two or three at a time. I feel like I have my hand in many projects all at once, so it's hard to pull out just one. I don't know. They each have their own story, and so that's what's so wonderful about it is you get to be part of all those stories. In some ways, the bigger projects have more opportunity for transformation, for moving that ball really far forward. And so we're working right now on a project. Someone in the room is a lead designer on the project, but it's a wonderful new project for our business school. And it's, I think, really going to transform that school, who's already, one of the top business schools in the country, not quite as good as Fuqua's, but we're kind of aiming for that level. And this might help to really, get them to the next level that they really want to get to and deserve. And it's going to stitch parts of the campus together that aren't really well stitched together. So it kind of moves the programmatic piece forward. It moves the campus planning piece forward. I think it's going to create amazing new outdoor spaces that just don't exist today for people to enjoy. And so, that's what makes it fun, is when you see that kind of transformation, and to work with great architects.
Was the question the most interesting? What was the question?
Either the most interesting project you've worked on or the most coordination.
Yeah, so probably same project. Yeah. But the Broadhead Center, for anyone that's been to campus, the Broadhead Center was Grimshaw was the lead architect. That was sort of the definition of a transformative project for our West Campus in terms of what it's done, in terms of where it's located on campus, opening up that, really being sort of the living room, if you will, of West Campus community. And a lot of, it ended up on the cover of Architectural Record. It's become sort of this spec of architects to come visit. It's been very, interesting and successful. It was at times challenging to get to where we ended up. Wasn't always an easy path, but that also involved just a lot of coordination with the different constituency groups on campus, with the adjacent facilities, literally having to build a separate dining facility to serve meals on West Campus for years while that building was taken offline. So yeah, just a lot of logistics and coordination, but the end product has been amazing and transformative for the campus. So just glad to play a small part in that.
Can't pick just one, so I'm going to talk about a couple different ones, but so probably same thing. Most rewarding, most challenging was probably the Tally Student Center that I was personally involved in the most, and that is probably because, as with any project, your list of needs is yay long in your program, and then your budget is yay big when you're first introduced to it. And then leadership decides that, oh no, you're actually not going to get as much as you thought you would. So you have to go through a process of cutting the program right at the start, after you've actually started the project. So that was challenging in and of itself, because the list of needs are so long. It's just you want to do everything you can to fix these problems, right? The building was very old. It needed to just wholesale blowout, gut, and renovation and addition. But back to the point of the stakeholders, you know, we were dealing with a lot of students, which was great. We had student leadership on board with us, and they really made a critical difference in terms of getting the student fee approved, because as a public institution, it was an auxiliary building. It had to be funded by student fees. And so they were integral in making this project happen. But then there were also a lot of other stakeholders. You know, when you have a student union, you've got campus dining, you've got all these the bookstores, you've got you know, the student organizations, you've got student services for like advising and Division of Academic and Student Affairs. And then, you know, we had to go through kind of this list of, well, what makes the cut and what doesn't when you're doing the programming. So we did a visioning session and came up with a set of principles that either passed the sniff test or didn't. And to this day, we go back to those principles because the building has been so successful and transformed that part of campus. It did everything we wanted it to do, but people are still asking to go into that building because of the vibrancy that it brought to that part of campus. We're also working on someone who's in the audience today, which is going to be another transformative project where Harrelson, if anybody knows our campus, that old round building where we had 58 classrooms in it, that won a design award at the time, but just was not sustainable. It did not stand the test of time because it wasn't accessible. The slopes on the round ramps going up were too steep. The bathrooms were just plain scary. The classrooms were awkward. I mean, it just, you know, we did feasibility studies to say, how do you save this building? You know, it's reinforced concrete. It's a really big building. It's got 58 classrooms in it. And it was kind of at the center of our academic core of campus. But at the end of the day, we just said, we can't save this building. It's just not doing what it needs to do. When that building came down, a lot of the energy left the brickyard, which is kind of that central part of the academic core of campus. And so as part of our physical master plan, we surveyed a lot of students that feel safe or do not feel safe. And interestingly enough, the surveys showed that they didn't feel safe on what had been a very energized part of campus, not because there were crimes happening there, but the perception was that at night it was just isolated. Nobody there. There was no reason to be there after dark. So now we're looking at a project that's trying to bring some life back. It's a combination of classroom, of meeting space, of research, and you know, we're trying to have that building kind of transform that part of campus again, bring some of that energy back, maybe use the classrooms for other functions during the evenings and weekends, trying to make it, you know, really efficient in its use of space and enliven that brickyard. And so we're on track to get that done. Again, check back with us. It's still in design, but these are the kinds of transformative things that just make a campus what it should be. You know, it's really exciting.
As an NCC alumna, I'm excited.
Yeah.
For all the projects. But, all right. So are there any questions in the room? Yes. Yes.
Okay. I think the premise is that I'm the founding president of NCNOMA back in like late 80s. And one of the things that and that's what this is sponsored by NCNOMA. One of the things we were wanting to do is to collectively, with an organization, see about getting more involvement of African-American architects and minority architects into some of these projects on your campus. I could throw out some names like Gordon Rutherford, Vince C. and John Pierce, and Mike Hartwell, and in particular Marvin Wiggins. Those people took an aggressive position to try to hire African-American architects, not for they got projects. It was not necessarily just through the purchase directory. but through their initiative to make sure there was involvement, not only my firm, but other firms. At one point, there was 9 licensed Black architects just in Durham. I mean, some states only have 1. It's just in Durham. And of course, Phil Freeland's outstanding. He's like the Frank Lloyd Wright amongst us all. But a lot of the projects that were either to be in-house done, maybe your staff got too busy and need to outsource it. Some of those projects went to some of the small African-American firms. The larger projects, multi-million-dollar projects, yes, maybe being part of that. But the names I just mentioned was an earlier generation. And the people here probably weren't even born then. So what happened? It sort of died down. Maybe the interest just got placated. So what are you doing now?
I was gonna say, we have new leadership in place, and it's something that we're committed to now. It's something that we're taking active measures towards. So just in the past several months, we've engaged directly with African-American firms in Durham for design work in a way that is deliberate, and it's something that we are going to be focused on, not just on the consulting side, on the design side, but also on the contracting side. So it's something that I can tell you, conviction and certainty is something that we are committed to and making strides towards, because I would agree that in the past several years that the numbers were not where they should have been on that. So recognition has been made, adjustments are being put in place, and changes are being.
They particularly said, surely the evaluation of minority participation is doing construction. Subcontract, or do copy, or even paving. But up front, before the project is even in created, planning stage, advanced planning and so forth. Of course, purchase directory advertised out there, but when you look at all of the requirements for getting a job, of how big your firm is, how long you've been in business, I mean, these you've done before, it's a catch-22 thing. And a small firm can't get the work. So just, yes, I hear you saying both parts, looking at construction, but just looking at construction over the years have always been a thing. We've had minority participation, but that's on the construction part, not actually upfront doing the design. And it's difficult to do it upfront on the design because the project hasn't existed at that point. But it can be done. And over the years, early on, I was president for 6 years. We had many meetings with North Carolina State Construction Office. And they were beginning to recognize that. It built up, and then it died down. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if I'm asking a question or suggesting. I am really suggesting, okay, that you get busy.
Yeah, you mentioned Phil Freelon. We did work with his office quite a bit. Of course, then he passed away and his firm was taken over by Perkins & Will, who we are working with right now, by the way. But we're also working with Victor Vines right now.
Yeah.
And
Well, shoot, yes, so.
yeah. And I have worked a lot with Andre Johnson in the past. But you mentioned, you kind of hit the nail on the head. You know, a lot of these firms start out small, and when you're advertising for a project, you're trying to get the right fit for the project with the firm and that expertise. It's qualifications-based selection, right? So what we try to do is we do have the open-ended service agreement designer contract that lets smaller firms kind of put in, test themselves out, like get a feel for how it is to work with the university, and then kind of grow them up. So there's a little bit of back and forth mentoring that goes on there as well. But I've always had very good working relationships with those firms in the past. And I will always give them good references when they go, you know, somewhere else to try and get work as well, because that's part of the catch-22. You've got to demonstrate that you've done that kind of work. And if you're a small firm, it's really hard to get some of the bigger projects. You can start on some of the smaller as well. And things change. I've just seen so many firms be taken over, or people pass, or things are just changing constantly. But that's kind of how we try to approach it. Try to hire the job and help them enter those.
Okay. We did the roofing on a Millennium campus, but didn't get another job re-roofing. We did 3 buildings. What's $1 million project? On the open-ended contract basis.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that specifically, but you can talk to me later.
Yeah.
I wanted to add that at Chapel Hill, I gotta believe it's same for State and Duke as well, that having diversity on our contracts is a core value. And it's not just because we say, we're trying to do the right thing. I individually truly believe that having those different voices on our campus is incredibly important for the future of the campus, because of the kind of people that are in this community and that are going to be here in 20 years. It's not going to look like it was 30 years ago. It's going to look quite different. It already looks different. And people coming from different backgrounds and the spaces that they are occupying need to be welcoming to them. So we're trying to find diversity of viewpoints to get involved in those conversations. That's what we do. We create places, and the people involved in the planning and design of those places have tremendous impact on the outcome and what the experience is like. So over my first 2 years, I got a little frustrated that just kind of saying that wasn't enough, that's our core value. But when you look at who submits for our projects, it's not as diverse as we hope. So here's where I'd like more engagement with organizations like NCNOMA. I reached out to say, hey, I want to hear from you. I want to host an event to kind of start a dialogue, because how can we do better? How can we do more outreach of women, bringing that diversity to the conversation?
Can I ask a sort of a tangential question to that? And because the 3 of you are here, I'm really curious to hear the different standpoints. But so many institutions have reaffirmed or recommitted themselves to equity, justice, diversity, and inclusion over the last 2 years, and it's been really encouraging to see all these statements come out. And I think that folks on the firm side have said, okay, now how are we really meeting our expectations? And so I wonder if the 3 of you could talk about how your projects, whether they're renovations or they're new buildings, are reflecting the state, like the physical spaces are reflecting the statements of your universities.
Well, for us, it's a matter of having more seats at the table, right? So I think we're engaging with the campus community and many different voices within that community in a way that maybe wasn't as deliberate in the past. So I would say that that's one sort of real world example of just trying to go from words to action within that space, having a larger table with more voices there representing different constituency groups, and having them play a part in how projects are scoped, defined, and it's new territory, if you will. So we have to see how this plays out. But I think we started off on the right track in terms of getting those extra voices to the table.
I think similar for us too. We have a lot of stakeholder outreach and bringing those people to the table. And they're new groups that weren't on campus 10 years ago, from accessibility side, from different identity groups that have formed and want to talk to us. So we try to engage in that dialogue. That's really what it's about. It's bringing the voice.
And I would add to that, with our physical master plan that's underway right now, we took a very, very active role trying to reach out. So we would reach out to student groups that were the minority student groups. And sometimes just reaching out isn't enough. You have to kind of really pull them along, because sometimes they don't want to engage either, and so we're really trying to very actively go to where they are, meet them where they are, and have those conversations with them to get that input. And it's everything from accessibility to student groups to faculty, staff. And I think as part of this effort, we tried pop up, like meet them where they are, go to where they are, talk to them, send out surveys to get that kind of engagement, because people don't necessarily want to respond in one mode, right? There are different ways of reaching out to people and to try and get that feedback. So at the end of the day, we were actually able to contact over 3,000 people as part of this master plan. And that was a pretty wide cross-section of the demographic, and even beyond to the community outside of the campus boundaries. So that, I think, was a good example of how it can be done. It does take an extra bit of effort. But every time we have a building committee, we need to take that approach. Every time we do another project, we need to take that approach and just reach out to those stakeholders. It takes extra effort, but at the end of the day, I would add to inclusion and diversity and equity, belongingness. What should spaces look like that make people feel like they belong there, that they see themselves in that space? That's another level of conversation as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a work in progress.
I think that's an important thing that you added about student groups, maybe not always being forthcoming with wanting to participate, because sometimes they may not either know if their feedback will be taken, and implemented, if they're just being heard or if it's actually being implemented. And then there was also a period, I would say, mid 2020 to mid 2021 of just response fatigue of being asked. So what do you want? What do you want? And sometimes it's just a chance to sit and reflect on what the student groups want or what the individuals want before giving that feedback as well. Any other questions? I think we're past 7:30, and I know people like to eat dinner. So yeah, thank you all. Thank you to our panel. Don't have any final words.
Homework for us.
Or but really, thank you so much for coming out, and I really appreciate having you here and being part of the conversation.
Thank you. We're gonna leave her back in like.
Yeah, that's
No, that's right.
Hey,
I did, I saw you. I can't do it.
I was.
After that walk.
Yeah.